I want to talk to you today about some interesting stuff that we're doing on the data side with a lot of our game developer partners and clients and ad networks. So I like to, I'm from the Bay Area originally, I'm a big Warriors fan, so I always like to use them as my example of sort of the various ways that data impacts everyone's lives across the board in modern times. If you think about the amount of just data collected, whether it's connected street lights or refrigerators or TVs or cell phones or tablet devices or computers, so many places in the world that every day you do or you touch or you do something with that triggers some form of a data event that didn't exist even 5-10 years ago. And you think about how much of that data there is and what you can use it for. So if you're a basketball team like the Golden State Warriors, they take a very Moneyball style metric approach on how they evaluate player talent. So looking at very specific data sets around scoring and value of a player over their replacement and efficiency. And they've used that to construct a pretty interesting roster that has had the winningest 3 seasons in the history of the game. When they sign a new player like Kevin Durant, who's going to cost them a lot of money, or Steph Curry, they just signed to the biggest contract of all time, they actually do the math on that to understand their LTV impact, right? Like how many more jerseys are they going to sell? How many more tickets will they sell? They currently have a 30,000 person wait list just to be able to buy season tickets, which good luck getting. If you're number 29,999, you'd be pretty lucky if in your lifetime you get to buy those tickets. Maximizing efficiency in what they do by having their players use wearables when they're practicing to understand when they're tired or not. And it's resulted in, like I said, the winningest 3 seasons in the history of the game, 2 titles, and a ridiculous amount of money. In the Game 5 of the finals, when it won an extra game this year, they made so much money from that one game alone that it paid for all of Steph Curry's salary the entire previous season, which is pretty remarkable to think about. So, we always talk about who's keeping score, who's helping them to create and manage and utilize their data, and who's helping you guys and developers as a whole. And that's really what's sort of core to our business. So we're most well known for being a measurement and attribution provider used by many of the largest game developers in the world. Our friends who were just up here a few moments ago work with us, and a lot of the largest game and app developers globally utilize Cassava for measuring their mobile media spend and attributing their users back to the sources of driving that spend. What I want to talk about a little bit today, though, is not our core business that you know us probably so well for, but is the other ways in which we're using data to work with partners to solve problems and improve efficiencies in the market that have nothing to do with utilizing our core measurement attribution. Everything I'm going to talk about for the next little while does not require any SDK integration, doesn't require you using us for measurement. You can use Adjust or AppsFlyer or local hometown favorite tune. Of course, we are better than all of them, and you really should use us, but we're okay if you don't, because there's other things that we do that I think are interesting and useful. So I think the first thing to think about using a play from the basketball theme is this concept of spreading the floor, that there's so much crowdedness in this market. There's so many different vendors. Just walk across the street and you'll see as soon as you walk in rows and rows of tables of people who are hawking their wares. So many different places that you can acquire customers, and so many different places you can attempt to understand your users and where you get them from, that it gets crowded and congested. And so our thought is really, how do we help you identify what are the best audiences to go after for your specific game or title and your objectives, and what are the ones to stay away from, right? Where do we find problems, and where do we find success? So first, let's start with the scare tactics and the bad. There is staying on basketball theme, which I didn't necessarily mean to do as much as we have here. One of my favorite movies from the early 90s is called Blue Chips. It's a basketball movie about a coach who's paying his players, and he has a line in it that I love, which is, "A foul's only a foul when the ref blows the whistle." Right? So it's meaning that the bad thing only occurs when someone gets caught, or when the outcome they get punished for it. And so one of the things that we've seen as the market has evolved in the last couple of years, and really the last 6 to 18 months, has been sort of rampant need for measurement providers and data providers, independent data providers, to help developers identify and understand fraud. There are 3,000 plus ad networks that are and publishers that are integrated with us on the measurement side, that are places that our clients, our thousands of app developers and advertisers, are able to buy audiences from. And they run the gambit from Facebook and Google down to really tiny one-man shop that you've never heard of in sub-Saharan Africa who focuses on one little region. And so there's a lot of overlap across those, and there's a lot of opportunity, frankly, for fraud and bad actors to come into the ecosystem. And it may not be an individual network's fault. It could be a single developer on their network. It could be something the network knows as a whole. It could be rebrokering. There's a host of different ways in which this occurs. And so for us, it's become really important to help developers who are spending their, hard-earned dollars marketing their product on identifying where those problems hit. So we've rolled out a series of what we call traffic verifier fraud abatement tools. And I think that the important things to look at in that we've seen sort of most success, and there's a variety of ways that this works, is typically around things like ad stacking. So multiple ads being delivered and shown and clicked on all at once. There's what I like to call attribution front running. So it is, I'm a network, I drove a click from this ad. It didn't drive an install, but I'm sure as hell going to take credit for it, so I'm going to fire off phantom clicks all day long against it. There's of course just faulty device IDs. There's entire farms, click farms and server farms in typically remote countries that are generating faulty installs. In some cases even making what appear to be purchases, and then we never see the purchase receipts. So we've built sort of a set of tools that hone in on these particular angles and use cases and try to use data to smartly identify who the bad actors are, and identifying them on ways in which we can block them in the future for clients. So typically we look at things like device ID, so an IDFA or an Android ad ID that, we run these reports. We have a client I was looking at one the other day for who had the same device ID over the course of 3 days, had supposedly clicked on one of their ads 5,672 times. I am assuming they didn't. I'm guessing that person either has really sore thumbs or they weren't clicking on it that many times. And so you run into these sort of cases. The same thing we'll see with an individual site ID, right? So every network has their site IDs, their anonymized IDs that they typically will pass through to a developer on click or on install so that you can identify where the good stuff's coming from, where the bad stuff's coming from. The challenge, of course, is every network has different site IDs, and you're only seeing the data that is relevant for your campaign. So we take sort of a God mode view where we look at this across partners and across networks and sites. We map those across networks, we map those site IDs. So if we can identify a singular bad actor on this network who had a problem with this client, it's not just an isolated incident. We're able to pluck them out of the ecosystem as a whole and make sure that folks aren't running against that individual publisher who may be running this sort of odd, faulty, click stacking, ad stacking, or click fraud at whole. So I think to me it's a part of the market that is kind of like a dirty secret, right? That I think everyone knows there's a fraud to some degree out there, whether that's 1% or 10% or more, is hard to say, and it certainly varies depending on the types of campaigns you run, the types of partners you work with, the geos that you target, the types of OS that you run. You tend to see more on Android than iOS. You tend to see more in emerging markets than in the US and UK and tier ones. But it's a thing. It's a very real thing. And it's something that I think that marketers as a whole need to be paying attention to. So we've taken, like I said, a very proactive approach to trying to drill into it. There's a host of different specific ways for each individual title. We recommend you slice and dice the data, but I think it's important, whether it's with us or really anyone in the space, that anyone who's spending any meaningful amount of money in driving installs and re-engagement and marketing for their app or game needs to have a sort of a fraud strategy at this point to make sure that you're not just literally lighting money on fire by buying bad or fake users. The other side of our business where we focus on, let's move away from the negative, move to the positive, where we focus on working with developers to rather than trying to find the bad users that you shouldn't go after, trying to find the good users that you should go after is a product that we launched last year called the Cassava Collective. It is a very large data marketplace. It has about 1.4 billion devices in total in it right now that are running the free version of our SDK, our free app analytics product, that allows us to create, to curate, to capture, curate, and aggregate data at scale. And that data runs across a variety of data points. There's 40 plus individual data elements that we collect for every single time the user is using an app, clicking an ad, generating an impression, making a purchase, leveling up, registering, all the things that you do in the course of going from first ad impression to install to converting to life cycle of your time within that app. We help to, we take that data at aggregate, we look at it across these billions of devices, and we build custom audiences or allow our clients, our advertising partners, marketers, to build custom audiences to target the devices that are, the sets of audiences that are really best for their particular title. We really run the gamut, particularly on the game side. It's certainly the genre of apps that we're strongest in is on the game front. It runs the gambit sort of the way that you'd expect it to, right? Heavy volume on puzzle, casual, higher value users on mid-core, social casino, RPG, but really spans all genres. And like I said, we capture a host of interesting information about understanding users, not only what apps they have on their device, what games they play, and do they play multiple games of a certain genre, do they play cross-genre, but also what are they doing within those individual apps and games. And you know, it's funny when you look at, there's so many different types of games and so many different genres, and the gameplay is so different. If you look at a turn-based dice or word game, for example, you'll see a much higher frequency of sessions and a much smaller session length versus, say, a RPG, where you'll see a much lower frequency of sessions but much longer session length. So what we try to do is we try to normalize engagement across a combination of, you know, kind of envision a bell curve, if you will, where the inputs are session recency, session frequency, and session length. We break that out by genres, so understanding, you know, these types of games typically look like this, these types typically look like this, and then we identify sort of the audiences at the top of the bell curve. Who are those most engaged players, right? Not people who downloaded the game once and turned it off, but the folks who are really coming back and playing it over and over and over again. And then, of course, looking at things like level ups, registrations, retention, and then most importantly, purchases. And purchases not only as did they ever make a purchase, but how frequently do they make purchases, what price point are these users buying in on? Are they 99-cent only, or are they buying $9.99 packs? And understanding their frequency of purchase across different types of games. I think we're very much believers that there's a certain type of user who is prone to make a purchase within an app or a game, and there's certain types who are not. And so finding those ones who are likely converters, and then of course the ones who are whales, is most critical. And if you can hone your marketing in by eliminating the bad guys and really focusing in on the top ones, the efficiency that you can generate from your mobile marketing spend is really tremendous. Of course, you have to be a little careful about not overdoing it. I like to show this example. That screenshot right there is actually taken from my phone. So Lensable is a e-commerce company that makes, they replace lenses in glasses. Happens to be a good friend of mine who started it. He made some announcement on TechCrunch. They'd raised some money. I saw it. Said, oh, great. Saw his post on Facebook, so I went to their website. Every time I went back on Facebook for the next week, I saw that ad because I'd been on his website. The problem with it is I had LASIK about 10 years ago, so I don't wear glasses. I'm not going to wear glasses. I have no intention or plan on wearing glasses. I'm actually a terrible user for him, and it's sort of creepy, right, to know that they're reaching out to me and targeting me in that way. We also, of course, do geofencing, so we do location-based targeting, so we can actually find people based on exactly where they go. We had a DSP partner the other day who specifically downloaded one of our apps, or one of our partner apps, and said, I want to see how good you guys are at tracking location data, so here's my device ID, tell me everywhere I've been. And I honestly felt like a little uncomfortable when I pulled the data out the following week and was like, all right, well, this is your address in Jersey City, and you went to a bar in Brooklyn on Friday night, and you have to be cautious about making sure that you're reaching people at an inflection point where you're reaching them with the right offer for what it is they're interested in, and overstepping the bounds and sort of giving the creep out effect. And the cool part of this data is that it can be utilized, not just for new customer acquisition, although that's typically in the game universe what most people think about and focus on, but also for re-engagement, right? Personalizing notifications, personalizing the communication that you have with your end user, dynamically changing your pricing, your storefront based on what you know about that user from a purchase history standpoint. You really kind of think about all the ways you can leverage data to make your overall marketing and customer conversion efforts more efficient. So I want to talk about a sort of case study of a partner of ours who I think is interesting because they have sort of both ends of the spectrum. They're a fairly large game studio who has both a kind of very basic, popular, everybody's heard and seen board game that has been around for a very long time and is very saturated. They also have a sort of major IP branded mid-core game, so really different audiences. One's an older female skew, very casual play, higher DAU, lower LTV. One is much more of a younger male audience skew that is a much higher LTV, lower DAU. So we work with them on building out audiences. Now, for both of them, they really wanted to focus on purchasers. For the casual title, it was much more around engagement plus purchase. For the mid-core game, it was really hard into purchase and high spenders. They focused on social platforms, so they were buying these audiences primarily on Facebook, Instagram, and Fan. We support all platforms, so there's like 3,000 networks, DSPs. Basically, anyone in that room over there who you may be buying media from, we can support by delivering audiences to. And the interesting is the results are really interesting. So for the board game, they saw a 5% lift in CVR and a 4% lift in day 7 ROAS. Now that doesn't sound necessarily like a huge amount, but when you think that the benchmark that these audiences were being set against was Facebook lookalike models of their own high payers, it's pretty interesting, right? So I like to, when we talk with our advertising clients, I always say, you got to think about your ad spend, your marketing, your customer acquisition as sort of a full stack, right? At the very top, most of our clients across all of Cassava and the mobile ecosystem as a whole will tell you that the number one way they acquire customers efficiently is lookalike models of their best purchasers on Facebook and Google. Now maybe some iAd or Apple search ads. Those are going to be your highest value, good scale, cost-effective way of driving meaningful reach and LTV, which is great. That's fantastic. There is a saturation point, right? You can only spend so much money against those audiences in a given market over a certain time period until the prices go up. We are the industry of mobile acquisition is the opposite of Costco. You don't get a deal for buying in bulk. You actually pay more, right? The more volume you're doing, the more you pay on a per unit basis, which is fascinating, but makes a lot of sense, right? There is only so big of a universe, and you're usually competing against other folks for those same users. So to me, I really make sure that our marketers think about it from a full funnel standpoint. Those 1% Facebook US lookalikes of iPad social casino purchasers, yeah, those are going to be number one. Those guys are going to be awesome. And then you're going to have another that maybe is your Google ads and another ad network and then another network, and maybe you get down to some affiliate deals, and this is your full ad spend, right? You put as much as you possibly can into the top until you reach that point of inefficiency, and then you funnel it down and down, and you cut off partners who simply aren't generating a positive ROAS or aren't driving any meaningful lift for you. So when we work with partners, I say, look, to me, trying to make your top better is really hard. It's really hard to do. But trying to make your middle and bottom better can have a really meaningful impact on your overall marketing spend. And that's really where we focus, right? It's cutting off the really bad stuff that's a waste of money, and then infusing it with additional audience that'll help you improve that middle part of where you spend your money. So that is a pretty big difference. If you can all of a sudden onboard new audiences that allow you to spend more at the top and pull from the bottom, that's fantastic, right? When you look at your spend as a whole, it makes a big difference in efficiency. On the mid-core side, the numbers were even much better. Significant lift in CVR and significant lift in ROAS, and that actually continued. I haven't updated the slide, but when we looked at day 30 and LTV, the numbers were even greater. And I think that was really less scale there and really more a focus, really honing in on their version of a whale, right? A really high spender who was known to be a really good converter inside of their type of gamer app. The other one I love is using your data for understanding your audience. And this is outside of the game universe, but talks a little bit about my slide earlier about glasses. So one of our other clients is a brand called 1-800-CONTACTS. We also work obviously outside of games in the app universe. And 1-800-CONTACTS came to us for their marketing and said, all right, so what audiences should we do? I said, well, 1-800-CONTACTS is going to have to be a bunch of old people who are going blind and need lenses. So let's target a bunch of old blind people. And so we took, a sample of their audience and we ran it through our data set to say, what do we know about them? Turned out I was way wrong. Actually, 1-800-CONTACTS app users are not what you'd think a traditional 1-800-CONTACTS user is. Instead, it skews very heavy young female, and typically they don't actually have vision problems. They're using the contacts as fashion. So their audience wildly overskewed when we looked at like locations they'd been to, at attending Coachella and EDC and these like festivals where they were using this really almost as costume more than actual eye repair. So I think, when you're planning your marketing, your media, it's a lot of times it's easy to say, oh, well, this is my audience, right? I've got a first-person shooter game. My audience is males who look like this and live in these areas and blah, blah. I would suggest always kind of stepping back and seeing where you can take audience data. We provide it. Facebook has a fantastic audience insights tool. You can upload a list of your data anytime you want, totally for free, and go into their Facebook audience insights and they'll show you a whole bunch of things about it. I would highly recommend doing that with various different subsets of your audience. So not just your total users, but also who are your purchasers, who's highly engaged, who isn't, right? Who's downloading your game and you're losing them quickly? What's the psycho or demographic trigger there that you can understand about them to potentially change that, right? Improve your retention against those audiences by understanding them a bit better. And then it's about hitting the bullseye, right? So finding the platforms that you can run best on. We typically, see the most happening on social. So the Facebooks, Instagrams, Twitters, Snaps, the world. We also have a lot of clients who run programmatic. Tends to be heavier non-gaming, frankly. On the programmatic side, there are some really good mobile-first DSPs, the Liftoffs and Jamps of the world. That I think are pretty strong on the gaming side. And then the big platforms, the Googles and Apples, and even direct publishers. We're seeing quite a large uptick in clients who are buying campaigns on Pandora and Musical.ly and these apps that have really big volumes. Maybe not necessarily gaming apps, which don't tend to push ads as much, but apps that are more heavier ad support as places where you can identify audiences. Because just because someone's listening to Pandora doesn't mean they don't also play Candy Crush or Game of War, right? So understanding your data, your audience, but knowing that it's kind of constantly moving. And that picture is supposed to be a really fun video of them actually doing the wave, which to me is like the best example of a crowd literally moving, right? And this notion that your users are not static. They will not always stay the same as your game, particularly if you are a studio that has multiple titles, as you have more titles that come out, as the market evolves, as new handsets come out, your audience changes. And I think it's really important. I think a lot of times people build a marketing or a customer acquisition plan with one specific focus in mind and don't necessarily think about how frequently they need to be optimizing that in terms of understanding who their users are, what their creatives are, where are they running, can they do global frequency capping so you're not reaching the same user over and over again, but you're understanding your audience holistically rather than just in an individual silo. And the last thing I'll mention is a plug for something new that we just launched yesterday that I'm so excited about when we think about sort of the future of data, which is a partnership with Ericsson. Most people think of Ericsson as like Sony Ericsson, like early smartphones and handsets in like the early 2000s. Their actual core business, they don't even make phones anymore, is providing infrastructure to operators. So they power like 70% of the phone calls, text messages, and browsing that happens on devices in the world runs through their pipes. We have partnered with them to roll out a new sort of modern DMP that allows them to aggregate and onboard operator data into a solution that provides a lot of the same functionality for game and app developers, where they can better understand their audiences, they can better identify who are the good users and who are the bad users, and optimize their campaigns most effectively against it. To me, it's super interesting as someone who's been in mobile for, God, much longer than my youthful appearance would lead you to believe, which is that, you have a few companies in this space who sit on top of massive piles of data. I mean, you just think about how much Apple, Google, Facebook, Amazon, a handful of companies really know about you and your devices. And the operators are one of the few who are in that space who have never been in this space, right? I've never been in this world. There is no oath now with Verizon buying AOL and Yahoo as part of this, but prior to that, there is no US Cellular or France Telecom booth across the hall. And that's a problem, right? These guys they are ultimately the way, the pipes with which you connect with your consumers through smartphone, tablet, even connected OTT devices. You're running through their systems and through their networks. They know so much about them that I think there needs to be some better way of doing info sharing. So we've created this platform that I think is pretty unique. It has a whole bunch of compliance, data management compliance levels to it around hosting data in market, being able to do data ingestion on site, allowing operators to pick and choose who can see their data, and where it can be accessed. So there's a whole bunch of kind of rich tools in it that I think make it carrier operator compliant. And for those guys, I think it's interesting. You can go to virtually any operator in the US and get an all-you-can-eat, full data, unlimited minutes and text plan now for pretty darn cheap. And that's not going to change. Those prices are not going up, right? They're only undercutting each other for the foreseeable future as sort of the markets become saturated. And for them to have alternative ways to drive revenue and other business units to get into or business lines to get into is super interesting. I think it's something that anyone who plays in the mobile marketing app space needs to be keenly aware of, that those guys are still huge components of this industry, even if they haven't necessarily felt like it for the last 4 or 5 years, and making sure that you understand the dynamic of that, to me, is super critical from not only a data perspective, but just a general ecosystem play. So I'm super excited about it. We just launched it. You can probably find my contact info. If anyone wants to try any of this stuff out, for developers, we can give you free login. It's access to play around with all the tools and understand the audience stuff, and happy to provide any more specific details that are useful for many of your types of games. That's it. Thanks, guys.